All right, we're live. We're back. My name is Sunny. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Thanks to our sponsors, Raz Rocket and TTM Ventures. Today I'm joined by Brian Lee. Brian, where are you calling in from today?
Hey, Sonny, I'm here in actually sunny Chicago, but cold Chicago. But I'll take what I can get, here in February.
I like Chicago. Chicago's one of my favorite cities. I heard that I read somewhere that Toronto is actually like the city of Toronto was mapped after was inspired by the city of Chicago. We're kind of like a Chicago if you look at the outline. We've got the
Yeah.
lake,
I
but
wouldn't be too
we're obviously
surprised.
smaller.
Yeah,
Yeah.
although I do have a friend that moved here recently from Toronto that said, nothing against anyone from Toronto, but to me, I love Chicago because well, I was born and raised in New York, but so I've kind of got a little bit of mix of both, but have been here in Chicago 20 years, and it is tough to compare. You have such a really nice community feel from the different neighborhoods to especially the corporate and entrepreneurial groups here. So, it's definitely for anyone thinking of moving here, I'll always advocate for it. And you just got to get used to, I grew up in all four seasons. So as long as you're okay with a little bit of snow, then you're fine here.
Unfortunately, our co-host has to leave us. Yeah, he makes special appearances just near.
I'm sure he's got questions lined up already. So
yeah, definitely. But he's got to knock out some coding. He already beat me to 0 inbox this morning. Quite a character.
There you go.
So Brian, I was doing. So actually, before we dive into the interview, do you want to share maybe a sentence or two in terms of the company, Gilder, what you guys do? I did interview one of your colleagues earlier this week, Michael, and so we've got some background, but maybe for those tuning in for the first time, give them a little bit of color.
Yeah, for us, for Gilder, we've been working on this venture for about 3 years, and it really came as a place to serve. So with Michael's background, my background, our third co-founder Tyga's background, we've all spent years in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And the biggest thing for us was whether you were part of an accelerator, whether you were pre-revenue, whether you had 10 million in ARR, a lot of the problems that founders go through at any different stage, right, are not just unique to them, no matter the industry or the product and the service. And so for us was really putting together a space where you can put the best operators and founders in the room together to share that knowledge, whether they are first-time founders or they've had 3 exits or they've raised, $500 million before, whatever that kind of success metric that they've experienced. You can save other founders a lot of time, a lot of heartache, and really help that high failure rate that so many entrepreneurs have, whether it's a restaurant or whether it's a SaaS startup. And for Gilder, that really became our mission when we first launched, and we've since really kind of brought it in a little bit more to the specific groups that we serve. But at the end of the day, right, it's like, can you put together some of the brightest entrepreneurs in the room together to be able to share and collaborate on that knowledge to help reduce the failure rate that so many founders see?
Yeah, that's very inspirational. I love that. So Brian, I was reading about your background. Let's maybe start with a little bit of history on yourself. You studied political science and entrepreneurship at Purdue. That's quite an unusual combination. What was going on in your head at that age, and what made you want to pair those two together?
Yeah, and definitely for Purdue being a primary engineering school where most of my other friends and people, and whether it's just colleagues at the dorm and the fraternity, were also doing that. And for me, I started off in business, and then after failing Calc 1 or needing to take Calc 1 3 times, I think I realized that math and economics and at that skill were not for me, at least as a 18, 19-year-old. And so after, I'm sure, bringing some shame to my parents and to their hopes for me initially going to Harvard or whatever, I pivoted to political science with the idea that maybe I would go study law or not necessarily in public policy, but something to kind of impact, because I did always like being involved with the local community and how you could see change at that level. And entrepreneurship was kind of a side. That was more of a minor, but just, again, thought it was interesting, thought Purdue had a pretty interesting program with, again, founders and professors who had done it before. So pursued that hand in hand, and inevitably led me into business when I graduated anyway. But that was kind of the thought process when I first stepped into that. And then honestly, probably I think House of Cards had come out or like some other shows, and I was like, oh, politics seems pretty interesting. Let's give that a shot. And it just goes to show, I think, how much kids know when they first step into college and pick their major.
That's good. So you worked at also some of the biggest well-known consumer brands, Hershey, Ferrara, a whole bunch of other companies. So what did working inside those big CPG companies teach you about products, branding, and what consumers really care about?
Yeah, I mean, they were great experiences. I think at the end of the day, whatever you're doing, whether it's again a job that you love, whether it's a job that you don't particularly love, and it's a privilege for I think most people to be able to enjoy the work that they do. At the end of the day, right, it is work. But I think when you have things that you're constantly being able to learn or apply to other things that you want to do, those really gave me good baselines for when I started my entrepreneurial journey, probably about 5 or 6 years into my first career. But you know, confection is one of those things that it was such a fun category because again, it's you're selling candy. But I'm sure people will argue the alternative of like, okay, like you could be selling better things or you could be, building better products that don't ruin your teeth or whatever. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of working and commercializing SKUs, figuring out again what a lot of entrepreneurs do today. What do people actually want, right? What are the pain points? What are the things that from a product perspective that people like? And a lot of times you looked at the standard Hershey bar, which has been around for over 150 years, and there wasn't really any innovation about it, right? It was a standard milk chocolate bar. And for the longest time, when I was part of this rollout that Hershey did called Lancaster, it was like a take on the Werther's type of caramel, but it's a soft caramel. And it was like this big innovation thing that Hershey hadn't launched a new product internally in like 40, 50 years or something like that. And personally, I thought it was a tasty product, but again, it's an interesting space when you want to break into something new, and that you find that there's only so much that the legacy overarching brand can carry a new brand when you put something in market, especially nowadays with so much D2C and social media and TikTok and ways to kind of bring out new products. So from Hershey to Ferrera and eventually with the Nestle acquisition, that gave me a good baseline to figure out, okay, what do I need to take with me for my first entrepreneurial ventures?
Then you also spent time at Aerotech, is that correct?
Yeah, that was very quick. That was my first ever paid internship, I think back in like 2009 or 2010 or so. And yeah, that was just for really about 4 or 5 months. But again, right, a lot of learnings from most of the jobs that I placed, at least as an intern there, right, for 5 months was from professional services, right, box packing, right, like things like that. And so it was just an interesting take again on what that industry looked like from people that were looking for those jobs and people that were delivering them. So had probably about 4 or 5 different, and I worked at the DA's office in Brooklyn back when I was, still pursuing that kind of law side. So I really had 3 or 4, or the privilege of doing 3 or 4 different things before kind of settling in on what I felt like I really enjoyed for the most part.
Right. And then you launched your first company in 2015, was it, right?
Yeah.
To take us back to that moment. Well, what was that? Was it like a spark? Was it something that happened over some time? And
it was just something that, so my best friend and co-founder, eventually I was living in Boston at the time with Hershey, and he was here in Chicago. We had come back from a trip. He was an English major at Purdue. And, for English majors and poli-sci majors graduating back in 2011 or so, the climate wasn't particularly, phenomenal. And so, but he went to go teach English in Japan after we graduated. And me and some other friends went to go visit him. And we had actually done an escape room out there, which was still pretty early in the world for when that kind of type of entertainment came out. And we loved it. Even though we didn't speak a lick of Japanese, we still had a lot of fun. And then we thought, hey, this could be something that's pretty cool and we should consider here in the States. So that was actually our first venture, was opening an escape room up in Evanston, so kind of by Northwestern. And we did that, as what we call our 5 to 9, right, after our 9 to 5. So we still had our full-time jobs. And then after the end of the day, would go, up to the escape room and start hammering and using the table saw and things like that. And so that was kind of our first foray into that. And just celebrated our 10-year anniversary on that first room here this year, and had the privilege of opening up about a dozen or so as well, separately, and entertainment spaces as well over the past decade or so.
Super cool. Super cool. So growing up, were there people in your life, I don't know, family members, mentors, teachers who planted this like entrepreneurial seed early on, or did it come from elsewhere?
Not really. And I'd say like I had the best in terms of like, childhood of parents that were kind of like, they both climbed high in the corporate ranks, right? They were able to give me, and I'm an only child too, and give me and I guess our family, right, a really great life. And that was initially where I wanted to go into business at Purdue, seeing that American dream of being able to, hey, you can, if you're smart and you're willing to work hard, you got to go to a company and you put yourself in a position to succeed. And that is, I think, what a lot of people, again, it's a privilege to be able to have that opportunity. And it's a privilege as well to be able to kind of leave that, right? To be able to, if you want to pursue being a founder or being a creator or whatever it is. But I didn't really have anyone that I think I learned that from. It was just something that I kind of picked up on the fly with my friend, again, like I said, back about in 2015. And so that wasn't necessarily part of the plan, but have been happily in it, I guess, for the past 10 years or so.
So I was going to ask you, by the time you'd exited 2 companies and worked across, I guess, multiple industries, what was the biggest lesson that you carried forward that you couldn't have learned from, let's say, a textbook at Purdue?
Yeah, and the exits, like I've had a few more, but I don't count like I had some that were like, small 6-figure exits or 5-figure exits. So I know it's kind of arbitrary, but like the way I look at it, and I've learned from all of them, that's kind of the end of the day, where a lot of it, I'll admit, I just got lucky where there was some, like one of my business partners on one of the escape rooms that I opened that was in Youngstown, Ohio, right? We found this thing on Facebook Marketplace. I met this guy in Canada from Toronto, but that I'd never, we had bought, ran it for 2 years, brought on partners, sold the business, all still without ever having met in person. And it's one of these things that we still keep in touch from time to time, right? But there's a lot of kind of like trust that has to go into these things. But I've also heard from plenty of other founder friends who have gotten burned, and it's tough because you do have to put some blind trust to a certain point while still protecting yourself. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think everyone's got a different appetite for risk. And as I kind of said earlier, right, it is a privilege to be able to forsake a comfortable salary or, kind of lean into your savings to be able to do this and become a founder and not pay yourself maybe for the first 6 months, year, however long. And so for me, I felt lucky that I was able to, work a full-time job and still at night build these companies as well. But that was the kind of biggest thing. And now, especially with this, with what the creator economy and everyone has allowed nowadays, right? It's given so many people more opportunities to build their own personal brands and build their own companies and do amazing things. It's just unfortunate that I think 10 years ago, right, that was just nice because you had incremental supplemental income in addition to be able to just enjoy things. Now it's almost out of necessity because of the rising cost of certain things. You almost feel like our people are forced into having what used to be a side hustle is now a necessity, right? You have a Uber driver who has a full-time job and also moonlights for Uber, right? Or also DoorDashes, or the people who have, Etsy shops and things like that in addition to working a full-time job. So there's more ways than ever to earn, but I think it's out of necessity from just living, rising cost of wages and everything else that goes into it.
So maybe let's switch gears a little bit. Tell us about the story of Romely's origin.
Yeah.
I was reading about it. It's quite interesting. So I guess my main question was, like, when did you get to the point where you're like, someone needs to build this?
That was a fun one because I think at the end of the day, that was a consumer platform similar to like a TripAdvisor, Get Your Guide. And I'll admit we were very naive as first time, tech or software founders going into that. This was 2017, I believe. And then quick context, we had gone on a trip, me and my co-founder, Bonne, and then our third friend, Dan, gone on a trip out to the UK. We did like Edinburgh, Scotland, that area. And our third friend, Dan, who was our tour guide, or kind of had planned on back to the trip, we went on this hike in December, right? It was for New Year's and like, it was kind of nice, but it was kind of raining and funnily enough, he came down with pneumonia. And so he's like, luckily they've got a great health care system over there where $20 of antibiotics and stuff, and he was more or less good to go, but good to go being, you can leave the hospital, but you are quarantined and bedridden, to one section of the Airbnb. While the other two of us, right, all right, let's just go wander and walk around, right, and see what's out there. And the initial concept came, all right, you can use Google, Yelp, TripAdvisor, blogs, and all these different things out there, but they're just a lot of times it either just highlights the really big touristy SEO driven things, or you're spending like hours just trying to figure out, is this thing worth it, right? What actually it's going to be cool and add value. And so the idea behind Romely was, hey, how can you feel like a local in your own city? If you lived in Chicago for 20 years, how can you feel like a tourist in your own city? Or if you're traveling to a new city you've never been to, how can you feel like a local and really know the things that people are actually recommending? So that was the original idea behind it. And we grew it from 2017 to about 2019 when we both went full time into it. And then, of course, the pandemic came and I think impacted a lot of people's businesses, not just the travel sector. But for that and for escape rooms where, you were locking strangers in rooms with each other, that also was not a great business model during the pandemic. And so forced us to pivot. We went through the Draper program out in San Mateo and it pivoted our model today now, which is working from B2B, chambers of commerce, tourism boards, destination marketing, and also escape rooms and creating these kind of unique experiences for people to have in their own cities or wherever they are in the world.
Cool. Yeah, Tim led my company's Series A back in
Amazing.
Yeah, back in 2020, and his son Adam Draper invested in UnoCoin back in 2016, and we went through the Boost program. So I know the building you're talking about. Big
That's
fan
cool.
of the
Yeah,
work.
for the hero training and
Yeah. Oh, it's such a cool building. It's a cool vibe. So after building Roamly, what experience or frustration in the startup ecosystem made you realize you need to build something like Gilder? So maybe help us paint that picture.
Yeah, it was one step after that kind of really brought it home. Where so for Roamly, we certainly had our fair share as first time founders, right? We were kind of luckily successful, I would say, in our first few ventures where we thought, hey, we were kind of riding that high, like, can do no wrong. Like, yeah, it's easy to fundraise. It's easy to get those users, right? And which is certainly not the case, but we again kind of got lucky with that enough, especially with the pandemic, that we found a nice middle ground through that. And then when I joined an accelerator down in Austin as head of product, where I met my two co-founders here at Gilder, a lot of that came from we worked with Series A founders, 2 to 3 million ARR, to pre-seed founders, first 5 customers. And kind of what I alluded to at the very beginning of this conversation, and talking with these thousands of founders over the course of the 3 years that we worked there, we realized that a lot of the pain points, a lot of the journeys were all so similar. And whether you had a lot of great support groups out there, again, your incubators, accelerators, communities, whatever, but they were just all so fragmented between those that catered to specific regions, specific groups, specific industries and stages, that you just didn't have something that were able to support founders as they looked to grow through that path, right? It was either, oh, you're already at 50 million ARR and beyond, great, come join us, right? But we don't show you a path how to get there, or vice versa. So that was the big realization for us, and talking with these founders and working with them. And now I have the privilege of mentoring at Founder Institute and Watson Institute out in Boulder. And that's still a collective sentiment that people have, right? Like our founders are really yearning for that support, and AI and ChatGPT and Gemini and stuff can only help so much. So how do you really surround yourself with founders and those that have done it before that can shave off, hundreds of hours of beating your head against the wall and that trial and error just with a conversation? And it's never as black and white as that, but can you manufacture as many of those meaningful connections and connections as possible to be able to help people connect?
So for people who haven't heard of Gilder, or let's say I'm explaining this to my mom or my 11-year-old daughter, how do you explain it, and why is it different from other founder communities or accelerators out there?
Yeah, I'd say more than ever now, people are looking for that third place, as it's always been, right? You kind of had your home, you had your work, and then for some people it's it's church or synagogue or religion. Some people it is they play football or soccer or whatever. It's like that third place where I think you genuinely can use to actually improve what you're doing. Again, sometimes it's from a mental health perspective, sometimes it's for your company, sometimes it's just for your own sanity check. But that's the biggest thing I think that separates us with Gilder, at least as we've tried to build it into this over the past 3 years, is we intentionally keep it small, where the idea is we get the chance, myself, my 2 other co-founders, our community manager, we get the chance to work with every single founder at a one-on-one level. And that's not something that certainly everyone gets to do. But at the same time, we didn't build this to charge people thousands of dollars, right, for advisory services or consulting services with a big retainer. We love this space. As myself and my other 2 co-founders, we've all been founders in the past, right, with exits and with failures. and we understand the pains that we went through. We've talked to hundreds and thousands of other founders that go through the same things. And it's cheesy because you have a lot of, not every founder is building a company that's going to change and improve the world, right? Like there are some products and services that just don't do that. But at the end of the day, if you can create something that helps one or two other people, because what you're doing or what they're trying to do didn't exist before, that's adding value. And it's really cool to see some of the things that founders are building out there that are providing even that value to one or two other people. So that was the biggest reason for us at Gilders. Can we truly get deep in the weeds and help provide connections and introductions, whether it's to founders, investors, operators, to help those companies succeed? And that's been our mission since we launched in 2023, and hopefully we'll be able to continue that on.
Very cool. So Brian, I want to be mindful of your time here as well. Maybe help me land the plane. If you zoom out 5 or 10 years, what does the world look like? What changes for the next generation of founders who come up through your community?
Yeah, and of course, right, it's not just the community, but I think everything that we're seeing now with it's never been. I've been lucky where with Roamly, with co-founder Bane, he's the one that wrote the hundreds of thousands of lines of code himself. I'm not a technical founder by any stretch outside of product and knowing the language, but it's never been easier and more inexpensive to build an app nowadays, right? Whether it's a web app, mobile app, whatever you have. And so the biggest thing is, how can you build that defensibility and build a moat around these different types of problems that exist now, knowing that other people will have it. But again, these don't need to be these necessarily unicorn type solutions. There are phenomenal products and things that can help hundreds of people, thousands of people, whatever. And so the next generation of founders 5 years from now, even 1 year from now, is going to be, how can I make sure that what I'm building actually has a place, in the market currently, and then potentially a year or two from now, because you're probably going to see at least a few other competitors out there that are doing similar things. So do you have the right market? Do you have the right ICP? And is the timing right? And I think that's the biggest things that most founders should look for.
Awesome. And then where do people find out more? What's the website? Where do you, document your thoughts? Do you have a blog or LinkedIn?
Find me on LinkedIn. I try not to post cringy stuff. I'll take some selfies every once in a while, but LinkedIn's the easiest way. I think it's just a fun way to connect without being too serious about it. And then, I'm always open with emails and things. So feel free to reach out, and I'm always happy to have a conversation. It's just talking to founders is a lot of fun. So it's kind of the energy, I think, that keeps us all going.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time, Brian. We have 20 people that synced in here. So thank you all for tuning in, and until next time.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Sonny. It was a great time.
Yeah, Brian, hang out just